My name is Ingrid Newell. I'm 34 years old, and my family introduces me as still figuring things out. Tonight, at the dinner where my sister presented her new boyfriend like a closing gift, my mom would cut me off before I could say what I do for a living, and the whole table would laugh on cue. What my mother didn't know was that the polite stranger passing her the green beans had spent 14 months looking for me. Not for my sister. For me. And what happened 11 months later at my sister's wedding, under a ceiling I knew better than anyone alive, in front of a national television crew. My family still can't talk about it. I can. I've had practice being the only one at the table telling the truth. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where family secrets come to light and quiet women find their voice. If you've ever been the one your family underestimated, the one they talked over, the one they explained away, this story is for you. Drop a comment below and be sure to subscribe. The dinner was at my parents' house in Harrows Bend, Ohio, and I knew it was a performance before I got my coat off. The good tablecloth was out. My sister Brooke had made the roast chicken she'd perfected for the county fair pageant in 2013, back when she was Miss Congeniality and I was the sister they left out of the group photo caption. I came straight from my workshop, 15 minutes across town, and I'd scrubbed my hands twice, but linseed oil lives in your knuckles like a confession. My mom seated me at the end by the china cabinet, outside what she calls the conversation zone, and that was normal. What wasn't normal was the staring. All through the salad, my family kept glancing at me the way you glance at a vase on the edge of a shelf, not with interest, with dread. My mom, Brooke. Even my dad, Tom, peering over his glasses and then away. I checked my blouse for stains. Nothing. The boyfriend was the only one who looked at me like a person. Grant. Tall, careful manners, the kind of listener who turns his whole chair toward you. He asked my dad about his tomatoes and actually followed up. Brooke watched him the way you watch a lottery ticket. My mother watched him the way you watch an auditor. And in the gaps, everyone watched me. Warning looks, passed around the table like a dish nobody wanted to hold. I'd been in this family 34 years and I still couldn't read the whole code, but I knew the channel it came in on. Something about tonight was fragile, and they'd all agreed in advance the breakable thing was me. Then Grant turned, gave me his whole chair, and asked the politest question in the world. "And what do you do, Ingrid?" My mother set down her fork with the sound of a gavel. "Don't embarrass us." She said it lightly, brightly, the way you'd say more wine, and that is exactly what made it land like a slap. This wasn't anger, it was procedure. The table laughed. Not cruel laughter, which somehow would have been kinder. Rehearsed laughter. The laughter of people who had heard this bit before and knew their part. My aunt tittered into her napkin. My dad studied his chicken like it contained a message. And my sister, glowing, radiant, 12 hours away from perfect, leaned toward me with the smile she saves for cameras and said, "Maybe lie this time so you don't sound so pathetic." More laughter, warmer now, relieved. The vase had been moved safely back from the edge of the shelf. Grant didn't laugh. I noticed that even then. He looked from my sister to my mother to me, the way a man checks a room's exits. I sat there with my hands in my lap, and I did the thing I have done at that table since I was 22. I smiled. I counted to 10 the way I count strokes when I'm planing a drawer face, even pressure, no gouges. Any other year, that would have been the whole story. Smile, pass the beans, drive back to the workshop, talk to the furniture. The furniture is more polite. But that afternoon, I had come off a scaffold under a church ceiling in Toledo, and my hands still smelled like 140 years of other people's patience, and something in me was tired in a brand new place. So I didn't just smile this time. I opened my mouth. "I'm a conservator," I said, in the same voice I use to tell clients their heirloom is older than they think. "I restore things people gave up on." That was all. Both true. Level as a workbench. My mother inhaled through her nose, the sound of a correction being loaded, and pivoted to the honeymoon question she'd been saving, because in her house the way you handle a mess is you talk over it until it agrees to not exist. Brooke picked it up on cue. Portugal, maybe Italy. And the table rolled on, relieved, and I reached for the green beans, already retreating back into my usual assignment, which is being furniture myself. Except Grant hadn't moved. He was looking at me, and his glass was suspended halfway between the table and his mouth. Forgotten. And there was an expression assembling itself on his face in slow motion. He set the glass down with the care of a man diffusing something. "I'm sorry," he said, and the table kept talking. "Newell." Louder. The table quieted. Newell? Newell Conservation? Out on Millbrae Street?" I said that was my shop, yes. And Grant did something no one has ever done at that table in my honor. He laughed. One short, amazed note. And pulled out his phone. His thumbs moved. He turned the screen around. On it was a photograph of a walnut highboy, 1780s, book-matched veneer, the finish glowing like something poured. I knew it the way you know your own signature. I'd spent 5 months of my life a foot away from that piece. "You did this," Grant said. "This is our foundations. My mother has been trying to reach you for 14 months. You could hear the refrigerator hum from 2 rooms away. My mother's face did something I'd never seen it do. It went looking for a script and came back empty. Brooke's fork stopped in the air with a piece of her pageant chicken still on it. Grant kept going, because he had no idea he was rearranging a house as he spoke. His family ran the Whitfield Foundation. Arts, preservation, a name even my mother knew from the society page she pretends not to read. They had underwritten the restoration of Fairmont Hall, the big limestone estate out on County Road 9, and the selection committee had ranked one conservator first for the ballroom ceiling. Newell. The only documented apprentice of Abe Fletcher, who'd restored Fairmont the last time, back in 1987. "We wrote to your shop twice," Grant said, bewildered, almost laughing again. "You're a hard woman to reach." I said I was behind on my mail, which was true, and did not say that I assumed anything embossed was junk, which was also true. My mother rebooted mid-scene. I'll give her that. "Well," she said, patting the table like it was a nervous horse, "Ingrid dabbles. She's always been artistic." And Grant, polite, unbudging, terribly sincere, said, "Mrs. Newell, the committee doesn't rank dabblers." Nobody laughed at that. My sister was looking at me with an expression I genuinely could not name because I had never seen it aimed at me before: recalculation. The boyfriend they'd staged this whole dinner to impress had spent the evening trying not to stare at the family embarrassment, because where he came from, the embarrassment was the celebrity. My mother reached for the wine and refilled glasses that were already full. Pale, all of them. Just like I promised you. She got me alone in the kitchen while the others had coffee, under the pretense of the dessert plates. My mother has a special voice for damage control, low and administrative, the voice of a hospital billing office, which is what she ran for 26 years. "You will not take that job," she said, scraping frosting off a plate with surgical strokes. I asked why not. "Because that hall is where your sister is getting married, if this goes where it's going. You'd be underfoot at Brooke's venue for months. Ladders, tarps. You in coveralls, while his family walks through in suits." She rinsed the plate, set it in the rack, and looked at me. And for one strange second I saw the thing underneath the whole performance. Not contempt. Fear. Fear with 30 years of management training. "This wedding is bigger than your hobby, Ingrid. One wrong impression and people decide things about a family. That's all it takes. One." And there it was, the operating system laid bare on the kitchen counter. She had never once asked if I was good, because good wasn't the metric. Explainable was the metric. A daughter in coveralls was a liability no matter what her hands could raise from the dead. I dried my hands on her good towel and said I'd think about it, which we both knew was my polite lie, the single dialect of mine she's fluent in. I drove back to the workshop with the windows down. Above my bench, taped where Abe left it, is a yellowed card in his block printing. "Nobody claps for the glue. It holds, anyway." At 11, my laptop pinged. The Fairmont Preservation Trust, formal invitation to consult. Subject line: regarding the ballroom ceiling. I read it 3 times and slept like a stone. Brooke called the next morning, half apology, half audit. She wanted to know why I'd made it weird at dinner, which is our family's phrase for telling the truth in a load-bearing location. And in the tangle of it, the staring finally got explained. They'd briefed him. Before I ever walked in, my mother had prepared Grant the way you prep a guest for a dog that bites. Ingrid is between things. Ingrid is a bit lost. Don't ask her too much. It's a sore subject. That's why the whole table had spent the salad course watching me like weather. They were waiting to see if the story would hold. I was a managed risk at my own family's table. It wasn't mean, Brooke insisted. Mom just wanted the night to go well. Grant's family is... You don't understand what they're like. Everything matters with these people. I said it sounded exhausting. Everything mattering. And she laughed before she remembered we weren't like that with each other. Then she went quiet. And in the quiet, she said the truest thing anyone in my family has ever said to me. You weren't supposed to matter tonight. I heard her hear it. The little intake of breath. I didn't mean it like that, Ing. I looked across the workshop at Abe's card above the bench, the glue that holds anyway, and I felt the sentence settle into place like a dovetail. Snug, permanent, load-bearing. It explained 34 years in a handful of words. Nobody ever means it, I said. That's the whole problem. I told her congratulations again and meant it and hung up. And then I opened the trust's email and typed 4 words I'd been circling all night. I'd be honored. When can we start? You should know how I got here, because my mother's version has me wandering off a sensible path into the woods. Here's mine. At 18, I did 1 semester of accounting at the community college, picked because my mother had a speech about health insurance and a framed idea of a daughter behind a desk. That October, our church hired an old man to fix the water-damaged altar rail at St. Anne's, and I stayed after choir to watch him work. His name was Abe Fletcher. He was 71 then, hands like tree roots, and he touched that ruined walnut the way paramedics touch people. I asked if it was hopeless. He said, "Nothing's hopeless. Some things are just waiting for somebody patient." I dropped accounting by Thanksgiving, and my mother didn't speak to me for a month, which she called dignity, and I later learned to call weather. 12 years I apprenticed in this same brick storefront on Millbrae Street. Veneer, gilding, hide glue you warm like soup, the chemistry of old varnish, the ethics of it. First, do nothing you can't undo. Abe died 2 winters ago, 85, at his bench, which is the only place he'd have agreed to do it. He left me the building, the tools, and a boiler with a death rattle. I live upstairs. I talk to Chippendale chairs more than I talk to my mother. The chairs are more polite. Here's the detail that matters, though. The one I didn't see myself for years. The sign out front says, Newell Conservation. No first name. No photograph in the local paper, ever. I've declined 3 times. 12 years of work, and I had never once signed a piece. Never hung my name where a person could point at it. I told myself that was humility. Keep that in your pocket. We'll need it later. The Fairmont Preservation Trust met me in the ballroom itself, which was theater, and it worked. Sheets on the chandeliers, light through arched windows, and above it all the ceiling. An 1897 mural, the 4 seasons wheeling around a painted sky, gray with a century of lamp smoke, water stained down the east corner like an old grief. My neck ached in the first minute, and I didn't care. The offer, ceiling and grand staircase, 9 months, $48,000 including materials. Fair money, honest scope, the job of my life. Then the trust director slid over the media addendum, a television series called Made to Last, national, the good kind, craftsmen and lighthouses and dying trades, had partnered with the restoration's funders. They'd film the progress and the finished hall, in use. Cameras, interviews. My mouth went dry in a way $48,000 couldn't fix. I asked for a personal carve-out. No on-camera interviews, Credit in text only. The director raised an eyebrow. Most contractors ask for more camera, not less. But she allowed it. And I signed with the fountain pen Abe left me, and if my hand shook, nobody said so. On the way out, a woman flagged me down in the parking lot. Mrs. Aldous, the retired librarian, gardening gloves, and no preamble. Ingrid Newell, I'm still cross with you, you know. I asked what I'd done. Last spring, we invited you to exhibit at the library, the history of local craft. We wanted your altar rail photographs. And you turned us down flat. Didn't even write back yourself. I stood there in the gravel with my contract under my arm. I had never received any invitation. Mrs. Aldous, I said slowly, who told you I turned it down? Before I tell you what she answered, you need one more piece of Abe, because he's load-bearing too. Third year of my apprenticeship, St. Anne's again, the big oak altar table this time, cracked clean across the top after a furnace flood. And I was 20 and ambitious, and I wanted to make the crack disappear. I'd planned the whole invisible repair, fillers and touch-up, a magic trick. Abe watched me lay it out, then put his root-knuckled hand flat on the split. What happened to this table? I said, a flood. So it's true then, the crack. I said, obviously. Then why are you about to make it lie? He showed me instead, a butterfly key, walnut against the oak, set proud where anyone could see. A little bow tie of new wood straddling the wound, stronger than the plank had ever been. People still touch it after services. The crack has held for 13 years. What he said while we clamped it is the closest thing I have to a religion. We don't hide the cracks. We make them strong enough to hold. I have applied that sentence to 1,100 objects. Chairs, cradles, a carousel horse, one entire church ceiling. Here is what I had never once applied it to, and I can see it now from this distance. Myself. My whole life in that family was an invisible repair. Sand yourself smooth, match the finish, vanish into the set. Don't be the crack in mother's tabletop. 12 years I gave other people's broken things their dignity back, and the whole time my own name was a split I kept puttying over. Mrs. Aldous was about to hand me the chisel that opened it. She looked at me funny in that parking lot and said, "Why, your mother, dear, she answers for you." I'll come back to Mrs. Aldous because I made myself verify before I let it become true. First, Sunday dinner, where my mother ran her counterattack like a quarterly review. She waited for the pot roast to land and then announced, to the table, not to me, that's the technique, that the $20,000 Grandma and Grandpa had set aside years ago for Ingrid's building would be held for wedding costs instead. Weddings come first, the boiler will keep. The boiler, for the record, was 14 years past its service life and sounded like a man clearing his throat before bad news. Hide glue needs a warm shop. Gilding size needs a warm shop. A cold snap at the wrong hour can cloud a French polish I'd spent 60 hours building. She knew none of that and all of it. She didn't need the plumbing diagram to know where to press. And then the second barrel, delivered with a smile to the gravy. Hensley's Accounting is hiring, by the way. A real desk. Something I can say out loud at church when people ask about you. There it was again, her one commandment. Be sayable. I did not fight at the table. You don't win at her table. The table is hers. I did the math on the drive home instead. 48,000, minus materials, minus 9 months of living. The Fairmont job would carry the shop, but not a new boiler too. So I picked up night work, French polishing dining sets for a furniture store in Toledo, 10 to 1 in the morning, 3 nights a week. Days under a painted sky, nights buffing shellac in a warehouse. You want to know what a woman's worth in my family? Check what she's allowed to freeze for. Now, Mrs. Aldous. She forwarded me the email chain that week, apologizing for the fuss, and I sat at my bench and read my own obituary in my mother's prose. The library's invitation, sent to my old contact address, my parents' house, from back when I was an apprentice and had no address of my own. And the reply, from my mother's account, polite as a sympathy card. My daughter is no longer working in this field. Please remove her from your list and do not contact her again. No longer working in this field. I checked the date. It was the same month I'd finished the carousel horse for the county museum. She'd seen it in the paper, uncredited, and asked why I wasted my light on other people's junk. Mrs. Aldis, bless her card catalog of a memory, recalled at least 2 other approaches over the years: a historical society talk, a school career day. Same address, same answering service. Each one declined in my name, kindly, finally. I want to be careful here, because it matters. I don't think my mother sat cackling in the dark. I think she truly believed she was steering a wayward daughter around potholes. Every door she closed was, in her arithmetic, one less chance for me to stand in public wearing coveralls and shame her. That's what made it worse. Malice you can argue with. Arithmetic just runs. I sat there a long time with the shop quiet around me, all those rescued objects listening, and I understood the shape of my own life for the first time. My mother didn't hide me from the world. She hid the world from me and called it housekeeping. I didn't call her. There was no version of that call where anyone heard a crack and thought to reinforce it. Instead, I went to work under a sky somebody painted in 1897, and I started climbing. The scaffold went up in Fairmont Hall on a Tuesday in November, a steel forest with a plank deck an arm's length under heaven. The first day, I did what Abe taught me to do with any patient. I lay flat on my back on the deck, 1 arm's length from the mural, and I just looked. Up close, the 4 seasons came apart into brushwork, a swallow's wing done in 3 strokes, a harvest wagon with its wheels scumbled into motion, the painter's confidence still alive under a century of lamp smoke, and 1 long water stain bleeding down the east corner like the building had been crying about something since Prohibition. I lifted my palm and held it a few inches off the plaster, not touching. Abe's ritual. You introduce yourself first. 9 months, I told it. I've got you. And I need you to hear this next part the way it happened. Plain. No violins. While I was lying there, the venue manager walked her clipboard across the parquet below and called up through the scaffold, friendly as a doorbell. Big year coming. We're booked solid after your reveal. First events locked in already. August wedding. Newell. Whitfield party. Any relation? The scaffold did not move. I did not move. Somewhere above my face, painted January went on snowing on a painted village. My sister. Of course. Brooke wanted the finest hall in the county, and the finest hall in the county was going to be fine because of me, and nobody in my family had connected those 2 facts, because connecting them would require saying my name and the word conservator in the same sentence. Distant, I called down, which is the truest thing I've ever said through scaffolding. So there it was, the whole second half of my story, laid out like a job sheet. Every hour of the next 9 months, I would be restoring the ceiling of my sister's wedding. Quick pause, because I need to ask you something. If you ever discovered your own family was quietly closing doors you never even saw, how did you find out? And what did you do? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if you're new here, subscribe. Because what my mother did when she saw my name on that contract, you should hear it from me. My mother came to the workshop in December. 34 years, and it was her first time through that door. She stood in the middle of my shop. The racked lumber, the wall of clamps, the carousel horse waiting for its museum crate, 12 years of resurrections, and she looked at none of it. She stood the way you stand in an airport lounge, coat on, purse held in both hands, a woman refusing to check her bags into my life. I'll come to it, she said, and came to it. Withdraw from the Fairmont contract. I'll give you $25,000. More than the boiler, more than Grandma's money. Consider it a business decision. I asked her to explain the business. She did, and I'll say this for my mother. When she finally shows you her ledger, she doesn't flinch. The wedding was the merger of her lifetime. A Newell marrying a Whitfield, and every variable needed managing. A sister on scaffolding at the venue was a variable. A sister in coveralls when the in-laws did their walkthrough was a variable. One wrong impression, Ingrid. People decide things about a family. I listened all the way to the end. Then I told her the truth in the only language I fully own. This one isn't reversible, Mom. First rule of my trade: never do what you can't undo. I signed. It's load-bearing now. She looked at me for a long moment, and something moved behind her face that wasn't anger. Inventory, maybe. A recount coming out wrong. At the door, she paused with her hand on the frame Abe planed by hand in 1974. Then stay off the ladders in August, she said, and was gone, and the bell over the door rang bright and stupid into the quiet. $25,000. To not exist at my sister's wedding. My dad came by 2 weeks later with a box of thumbprint cookies and a thing he needed to put down. He walked the shop slow, touched the carousel horse's mane like it might startle, and then he sat on the bench by the stove and told me about the shoes. My mother, 15 years old, St. Anne's parochial school. Her father, my grandpa Earl, I never met him, was the school janitor. 30 years of waxed hallways. And the mothers at pickup, the ones with sedans, used to do a bit when Sandra walked past. They'd drag their shoes on the floor, that squeak of a mop, just loud enough. Girls in her class picked it up. Squeak when Sandra answers in history. Squeak when Sandra wins the spelling ribbon. Her shoes had newspaper in them one whole winter, my dad said, looking at his hands. She showed me once when we were courting, and then never again. Made me swear. He took a cookie he didn't eat. The day you told her you were quitting accounting for furniture, she cried in the garage where you couldn't see. Not because she thinks the work is beneath anybody, Ing. Because she spent 40 years getting the squeak out of this family's floors, and you walked back onto the wax on purpose. We sat with that. The stove ticked. It doesn't make it right, he said finally, which was the bravest sentence of his marriage, but you should have the whole ledger. Then he asked me not to tell her he'd told me, and he went home to her, the way he always goes home to her, and I sat alone with the cookies and a brand new problem. It is so much easier to fight a villain than a wound wearing your mother's coat. The wedding invitation arrived in March. Heavy creamstock, Fairmont Hall pressed into it blind, which meant I could feel my own job under my thumb like Braille. Beautiful thing. And behind it, 2 days later, the phone call with the terms. My mother's list voice. The Whitfields would be hosting relatives from 3 states. The photographer was booked for the walkthrough. And I would attend. She was glad I'd attend, she said. And I believe she was, as Brooke's sister who was between jobs. It's simpler, Ingrid. One evening. You'll say you're between jobs. Don't embarrass us twice. Twice. I stood in my shop with the phone against my ear, looking at the wall where 12 years of other people's treasures had gotten their names back, and I want to be honest with you about the pull of it. Every family has a currency, and mine pays in one coin, being no trouble. I had been rich in it my whole life. All I had to do was stay rich one more evening. Instead, I looked at the RSVP card with its 2 little boxes and its blank line for names, and I wrote, in the good ink, in my steadiest lettering, Ingrid Newell, conservator, Fairmont Hall. Attending. No +1, no explanation. Just the truth. In a single line. I walked it to the mailbox on the corner that same hour so I couldn't reconsider, and when the lid clanged shut, it sounded exactly like a mortise chisel seating home. There are cuts you can steam out, and cuts you can't. I stood on the corner in the March wind and understood, calmly, both fully, that I had just made the second kind. My mother received the truth by mail. She did not call. Her silence had a size to it. The next months I can give you in strokes, the way the mural painter gave the swallow its wing. Winter. Night shifts at the furniture warehouse. Buffing shellac until 1 in the morning, sleeping 5 hours, then up the scaffold by 8. Spring. The water stain in the east corner surrendered inch by inch. Under it, a painted harvest girl nobody had seen clearly since before my grandmother was born, came back with dirt on her feet, and a smirk the painter absolutely meant. I logged every solvent, every retouch, in the bound journal Abe kept his in. Some nights I fell asleep up there on the deck, flat under a sky that was slowly remembering it was blue. And every few weeks, the funders visited. That is how I met Vivian Whitfield, Grant's mother, chair of the foundation, a woman my mother's age who wore quiet like other people wear jewelry. First visit, she climbed the scaffold ladder in her good suit without being invited, lay down flat on the deck beside me without being asked, and studied the harvest girl for a full minute. "Sturgeon glue?" she said finally. "Isinglass for the flaking," I said. She nodded the way examiners nod. No small talk about my clothes, no translation of me for the donors. She asked about consolidants the way other people ask about weather, and listened to the answers. On her third visit, she said, conversationally, "Sealing ward. You're the bride's sister. I put it together from the trust paperwork." A pause. One brushstroke long. "Odd. Your family told us you were between jobs." I kept my eyes on January. "I'm never between jobs," I said. "Just between thank yous." Vivian Whitfield laughed exactly once, like a door unsticking, and from that day forward there were 2 women in the county who knew precisely what I was worth. In June, the producer from Made to Last came to schedule the finale segment, a kind man with a gray ponytail and a scheduler's ruthlessness. The series wanted the hall alive, not velvet ropes, but the room doing what it was restored to do. The first event on the books after final inspection was the August wedding, and the Trust's media clause covered venue events. He was already talking crane shots. I reminded him of my carve-out. No personal interviews. He didn't argue. He did something worse. He was honest. "We'll respect that, Ms. Newell, but understand what it means. We film the ceiling either way. The story airs either way. Your name is in the trust documents and the credits. That part isn't yours to hide anymore. The only thing you control is whether the person in the story is a name on a black screen or a woman standing under her own work." He let that sit, then added gently the sentence that followed me around for a month. "In my experience, when the subject won't speak, someone else always will. Stories don't stay unnarrated, they just change narrators." I climbed back up the scaffold after he left and lay under the finished spring quadrant, and for the first time the silence up there didn't feel like sanctuary. It felt like a draft coming through a joint I'd never sealed. All my life I'd told myself invisibility was humility. But invisibility isn't a neutral act. Not really. It's a vacancy, and vacancies get filled. My mother had been narrating me for 34 years to librarians and historical societies and future in-laws, and I had held the ladder for her by saying nothing. I could keep hiding from the camera. I could not keep hiding from the name I had finally learned to sign. Brooke came to the workshop in July, 7 weeks out from the wedding, carrying fabric swatches as a passport. She had never seen the shop either. Unlike our mother, she looked, wandered the racks, touched the carousel horse, picked up a cabinet scraper and put it down like it might be loaded. "Has it always smelled like this?" "Linseed and hide glue," I said. "Since 1974. She circled a while, swatches forgotten, and then she sat on Abe's stool and came apart a little, in the contained way pageant girls are taught. "The Whitfields were lovely," she said. That was the problem. Lovely in a language she was still learning. They talked about board seats and Basel and provenance, and she'd nod and file words away to look up in the car. Mom had the wedding scheduled down to the minute, including, she laughed wetly, a family photo slot timed for when the film crew broke for dinner. "She thinks of everything." Then she looked around my shop, at 12 years of patient repairs, and said the thing she'd actually come to say. "You're lucky, Ing. Nobody expects anything from you." She meant it kindly. That's the worst part. I handed her back her swatches and said, as gently as the truth allows, "That's not luck, Brooke. That's a sentence. I've just finished serving it." She left with wet eyes and perfect posture, and at the door she stopped. And for a second I saw the 8-year-old who used to hide in my room when our mother's disappointment went looking for a target. "The film crew," she said. "Mom got their dinner break in writing. She planned around you, Ingrid. She always plans around you." The door closed. The bell rang. 7 weeks out, and both of us finally knew the seating chart. We struck the scaffold on the first Friday in August, and Fairmont Hall got its sky back. I wish I could hand you what the room did that evening. Late sun through the arched windows, and 129 years of lamp smoke gone, and the four seasons wheeling overhead in the colors the painter mixed the year my great-grandparents were children. The trust director stood in the middle of the parquet and forgot to finish her sentence. The inspection passed without a note. And then 2 men from the trust did something I hadn't requested and couldn't prevent. They mounted a small bronze plaque by the ballroom door, per foundation policy, the same policy that credits architects and dead painters. Ceiling and staircase restoration, Newell and Studio, 2026, 4 inches of metal. My name, in public, at the scale of 2 fingers. I stood in front of it longer than I will admit to you, and I thought about a sign with no first name, and a career of last pages, and I felt the plaque doing something no therapy had managed. It made the work exist in the same world as me. That's when I heard heels on parquet. My mother, with the wedding planner, doing their walkthrough. She saw me, saw the plaque, and read it the way you'd read a lab result. For a moment, nothing on her face moved at all. Then she turned to the planner with her hostess smile and said, indicating the doorway, indicating my name, "A potted fern would soften this corner, don't you think? Something tall." The planner made a note. My mother walked on into the sunlit hall her daughter had raised from the dead, trailing a to-do list, planning her fern. The night before the wedding, I had a legitimate reason to be in the hall. Final humidity check, contractor's privilege. And I used it the way people use churches after hours. The maintenance deck rolls along the cornice. I lay on it one last time, a foot under my finished sky, and I talk to the ceiling the way I used to talk to Abe, which is to say, quietly, and expecting better answers than I deserve. Tomorrow the room would be full of Whitfields and Lilies and a film crew, and somewhere in the middle of it, my family's version of me and my own version were going to occupy the same 100 feet of parquet for the first time. "We don't hide the cracks," I said to Painted January. "We make them strong enough to hold." So I set my terms, plainly, the way you set a clamp. I would go as a guest and a sister, and I would be glad, genuinely, because Grant is a good man, and Brooke under all the pageant lacquer is my sister. I would not perform, I would not campaign, I would not stand in front of any camera on purpose. But if the truth walked up and asked me a direct question, I was done lying to its face. That was the whole boundary. It fit on an index card. It had taken me 34 years to draft. I climbed down, locked up my kit, and my phone buzzed in the dark hall. The producer. "Looking forward to tomorrow. Heads up. Someone from your family called the network this afternoon. Introduced herself as the family spokesperson. Wanted to preview our questions." I stood under the ceiling with the phone glowing in my hand. Of course she had. Narrators don't retire. They have to be replaced. The producer had declined her, politely and completely. Network policy, no third-party approvals, and per the transparency clause he was obligated to tell the trust's contractor about the contact. Meaning me. My mother had called a national television network to manage my footage, and the only thing she'd accomplished was making sure I heard about it with time to think. There's a lesson in there about control, but she wasn't taking my calls to hear it. Wedding morning was blue and merciless, the kind of August day photographers pray to. My phone lit up at 9. "Brooke. Just keep it vague tonight, Ing. Please, just tonight." Vague. The family's word for me, in the end. Not a lie, exactly. A soft focus, a fern in front of a plaque. I typed and deleted an answer 4 times, then sent the only thing that was true and kind at the same time. "I'll be exactly your sister. Promise." I put on the sea glass green dress, the only thing I own that has never been within 10 feet of a shellac pot, and I looked in the mirror over Abe's wash basin. Not between jobs. Not a bit lost. A woman with 9 months of a ceiling in her shoulders, and her own name freshly cut into bronze, going to a wedding where the script called for her to be scenery. My mother had a plan with a fern in it, and a photo slot timed to the crew's dinner break. The network had a plan with a crane shot in it, and I had an index card. In my trade, when two forces pull a joint in opposite directions, the joint doesn't get to stay neutral. It holds, or it opens along the oldest crack. I drove to my sister's wedding to find out which I was. One question, while the guests are being seated. If stepping into the light would cost you the only version of your family that was ever kind to you, do you still step in? Answer me honestly, down in the comments, because in about 10 minutes of this story, that question stopped being hypothetical for me, in front of 180 people. Here's what I'll say about my sister's wedding, and I say it without a gram of irony. It was beautiful. The hall was drowning in white lilies, the quartet was good, and when Brooke came down the grand staircase, my staircase, every baluster of which I had cradled like a patient, even I forgot the staircase. She was radiant, and Grant looked at her the way Abe used to look at unrestorable pieces that got restored anyway, and I cried actual tears into an actual monogrammed napkin, because she is my sister, and I am not made of shellac. My mother ran the event like a conductor, and I'll give her this forever. She was magnificent. Every transition greased, every great aunt shepherded, every variable managed, almost every variable. Because through the ceremony and into the reception, quietly, on long lenses from the gallery, the made-to-last crew was filming the room being alive. And the room, my room, was performing over all our heads. Guests kept looking up. You could watch it travel table to table, the little upward drift of chins, Whitfield cousins from 3 states asking each other who, and somewhere behind the cake table there was now a bare bronze plaque. Because at 4 that afternoon, I'd been told, a woman from the trust had moved a potted fern and asked the venue manager, in writing, that it stay moved. Vivian Whitfield raised her champagne to me across 40 feet of parquet, a toast the size of a secret. And I watched the producer notice that toast, track it back to me, and check his watch against the light. The dinner break my mother had negotiated was in 20 minutes. The segment, I understood with total clarity, was not. He came to my table between the toasts and the cake, crouched by my chair, and kept his voice in the range meant for confessionals. Lights in 10 minutes, one segment, the restorer under the restored ceiling. The trust had confirmed to the network that I was in the room. One sentence, Ms. Newell. You can decline and we shoot the ceiling without you, but I'd be lying if I said it would be the same film. I opened my mouth, and a hand closed on my elbow, warm, manicured, absolute. My mother, smiling her hostess smile at the producer. Excuse us, she's needed for family photos, steering me through a service door into the back hallway by the kitchen, where the flowers give way to fire extinguishers and the truth of any venue lives. She turned to me, and the smile fell off like a price tag. Not tonight. Don't embarrass us. The old sentence, 3rd time in my life it would matter, and this time I heard everything packed inside it. The newspaper in the shoes, the squeak of the mother's souls, 40 years of getting this family off the wax. And then my mother, who does not negotiate, negotiated, which is how I knew she was afraid. You step into that light, in your little dress, and tell them your trade at your sister's wedding, and you make the whole night about you. Do that, and don't come to Sunday dinner. I mean it, Ingrid. I have never meant anything more. There it was. The full price, printed clearly, no hidden fees. The family, such as it was, versus the name, such as I'd built it. 10 minutes. The kitchen door thumped behind a waiter. Somewhere in the ballroom, 180 people were finishing their salmon under my sky. I didn't raise my voice. In 9 months of night shifts and solvent fumes, I had rehearsed versions of this fight where I was devastating, and standing in the actual hallway, I wanted none of them. Mom, the winter you were 15, the newspaper in your shoes. Her face went white, then a furious pink. Who told? And stopped, because there was only one who, and he was seating great aunts 40 feet away, and some part of her chose, right there, not to spend him. I understand what you've been running from my whole life, I said. I finally do. But Mom, I'm not Grandpa Earl's mop bucket. I'm not the squeak in the hallway. I'm the ceiling. I'm the thing this whole county is sitting under tonight, looking up at. Her grip on my elbow loosened, not to release me, recalibrating. And then my mother did the last thing in her arsenal, the true last thing. She let me see the wound. Her eyes filled, and her voice, when it came, was not the billing office. It was 15 and wearing wet cardboard. Respectable is all I have, Ingrid. It's all I ever had. The hallway hummed. Refrigeration, probably. I know, I said, and I meant it as tenderly as anything I've ever said. I'm giving it back to you. All of it. I'm only taking my name. I lifted her hand off my elbow the way I lift a clamp when the glue has finally set. No yank, no drama, a quarter turn, and it simply lets go, because its work is done, and the joint is either strong now or it never will be. I walked toward the service door. Behind me, she said, quiet, almost to herself. You'll regret this. And for the first time in my life, it sounded less like a curse than a question. I pushed the door open into the light. The camera was already running. They killed the uplights on the dance floor and brought up the ceiling wash, and 180 conversations rolled to a stop as an 1897 sky ignited over the reception. People who had been eating under it for 2 hours saw it for the first time. That's what light does. It's the difference between a room and a revelation. And into the hush the host asked me, Mick-soft, "And who are you?" "Ingrid Newell," I said. "I restored the ceiling. It took 9 months, and 129 years." A ripple, laughter and awe getting along for once. He asked what the work was, really, under the chemistry, and I gave him Abe, because the truth is, I've only ever had the one sermon. My teacher used to say, "We don't hide the cracks, we make them strong enough to hold. Everything up there has failed at least once. That's not the shameful part. That's the load-bearing part." I watched that land on faces, on the trust director, on a Whitfield cousin, on my father standing at the edge of the parquet with his hands folded, crying without fuss, the way insurance men cry. And then, the question I'd been bracing for since the hallway. Your family here tonight, I'm told. Who gets the credit for all this talent? The revenge was right there, gift-wrapped, national. One sentence about a mother who answered letters in my name. I looked into the lens and felt the whole arsenal pass through my hands and set it down. My teacher was Abe Fletcher, who restored this hall in 1987. Everything else I owe to this room. Applause started somewhere near the cake and took the hall like weather. Grant stood first, Vivian second. Then everyone, my sister in white with her hands over her mouth, the ceiling burning gold over all of it, and the camera, panning the family table, found one chair empty, its napkin folded with terrible neatness. My mother had left before the lights came up. She missed the cake. She missed her own triumph, is the thing. The wedding of the decade, executed to the minute, and the last minute belonged to the daughter in the little dress. My dad stayed. He stood beside me while the crew coiled cables, not saying much, holding 2 glasses of champagne like they were evidence, and finally he touched the sleeve of my sea glass dress and said, "The janitor's granddaughter. Look at you." Which I will keep forever. Brooke found me by the plaque, mascara gone abstract, bouquet dangling. For a second neither of us knew which family we were from. Then she said, "You didn't lie this time," and I said, "I never did." And my sister looked up at the ceiling of her own wedding for a long, long moment, doing math it takes decades to do. "It's the most beautiful room I've ever seen," she said. "It always was," I said. "It just needed somebody patient." She hugged me with the full pageant-trained core strength of her and whispered, "The fern was mine to move, by the way. I signed the request." My sister. There's hope in that girl yet. That night, upstairs over the shop, I sat with a cup of tea and watched my inbox do something it had never done. 4 museums, 2 churches,